Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome back to the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be talking or covering a supplemental draft for a C2C league. It's definitely very interesting because there's a lot to be gleaned here. We have the freshman recruits. We have some players that slipped through the cracks from last year. If you've never done C2C, if you've never done a supplemental draft, there's a lot to be learned here, whether it's strategy, whether, like I said, there's so many different ways that you can go about it. So I love looking at these kind of things, but we can also sit there and figure out, were these good picks? Were these bad picks? And everything in between. Now, Aaron was actually a part of the supplemental draft, so you'll have to take everything he says with a grain of salt because, of course, he's completely biased. No, but yeah, we'll have to try and keep him from choosing his picks every single time. But first, how are you doing, Aaron?
I will try to control myself tonight, John. Yes, but I'm doing well. Excited to break down this draft that I took part in. As far as some of the settings, there's not anything too significant. It's pretty standard in C2C leagues to have a 2 QB starting lineup setup. So it's like super flex, but you are required to use 2 starting quarterbacks each week. Slight tight end premium and PPR as far as for receptions, and slightly devalues passing quarterbacks and slightly incentivizes rushing quarterbacks. But it's not a big deal. I wouldn't freak out about those scoring settings for this discussion we're going to have tonight.
Absolutely. So, just because you were a part of it, before we actually dive into the actual draft, were there any like true strategies or anything that you were planning on going into the draft? Obviously, you want to stay water. You want to just go with the flow of the draft. But were you? I mean, even if it just pertains to your team or whatever, was there something you were truly trying to attack going into this supplemental?
Yeah, so I was actually trying to extract some value from trading down because I didn't have my first round pick here. So I'm like, well, I'm not getting one of those studs in the first round unless I pay an arm and a leg to move up. So I actually traded down, acquired some future draft capital, acquired more picks in the mid rounds, and ultimately I wasn't afraid to go over my roster limit, to go over the 15 guys or whatever you typically would select in a supplemental draft like this. I was not afraid because we have a long time until the season starts and we got to cut down. And we know that injuries happen. I lost 4 players to IR just with fall camp last year. Isaiah Nair and Ohio State running back Evan Pryor. There were a couple other like fairly big name guys who went down all in a week or 2 spans. British Brooks, UNC running back. So those types of things happen in the off season. I think it's a good idea to have a little bit more depth coming out of your supplemental drafts overall. And I even apply that to Devy drafts as well sometimes too. It's like not all these guys are going to hit, obviously. So taking a few more dart throws, I think it's a fine strategy to utilize.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point, and it probably leans to make sure you know the rules of your draft, rules of your league. If you're allowed to hold those players for a long period of time, or if you have to cut to a certain amount right after the draft, like that's obviously going to change the way that you do it. And but that being said, if you're already at say you're already at 45 players and then you're drafting 15 more, and like maybe you start cutting or trying to trade for future picks or things like that closer to the end of the draft. So like there's obviously a lot of strategy involved with all of that, and you can't just go willy-nilly just picking whoever the hell you want.
Right. You do have to take those things into account. One of the interesting things, though, was there became a point in, let's say, 11th or 12th round, around that range. People were trying to just get rid of picks. They're like, oh, I have way too many. But then once we came around to the 15th round, everybody was trying to get more picks again. It was just such a strange phenomenon. I don't think I've ever seen that in a league before. But I think guys started to realize, oh, shoot, I don't think I have enough CFF studs, enough starters to score me points on a week-to-week basis. They got a little too maybe excited about freshmen, and then they wanted to ultimately solidify their starting lineup. So they traded a couple guys, and they're gonna have to cut down later. But anyway, strategy can change round to round. You can go into the draft with one plan and then realize, hey, nobody wants to sell picks or vice versa. So things are fluid. It's good to know your league, but sometimes you just don't know what's going to happen.
And I think that's important for any league, not just supplemental, not just C2C, Devy, whatever. I just did a recent startup, and I'm pretty active, in trades and things like that in startups. But the people in this league were just going crazy. Now, this is just a regular dynasty league. It's not, it's not a C2C league or anything like that. But it's like I said, same thing applies. You're trying to figure out what your strategy is going to be and all that. I went in, thinking maybe I would try to trade down a little bit, accumulate some value, because I know that people are just wiling about these QBs right now. Like, you got to get stud QBs right away, like all that kind of stuff. And I mean, not to say that I wouldn't like to do that, but at the same time, I'm perfectly fine kind of waiting a little bit, and I don't want to overdraft those players. Well, when it was all said and done, these people are just trading like crazy, insane trades. And so I'm like, I'm just going to stand pat, and I'm just trading, or I'm just drafting these values round after round after round. And my team is insane. Like, I think I have 4 of the top 15 wide receivers in dynasty. It's like, it's absolutely insane. So, needless to say, like, there's a lot of different ways you can go about any draft. And, sometimes you might think one way, and then the draft starts and you're like, well, nope, that plan's out the window, like, almost immediately. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah. And I guess going back to that example, there were probably some times in the draft where maybe I should have held, maybe I shouldn't have traded down to try to pick up another mid-round pick or something like that. But in hindsight, those things sometimes are useful to look at. But ultimately, you got to go with what strategy you think is going to be best for your team long term. So I think in your case, it seems smart just to stay put, not also jump into the trading because of all the values that were falling to you. But as we may talk about in this draft, there were some guys who got sniped. I was going to take them. They got selected, and I'm like, well, I'm going to trade down and capitalize on that. So let's get into the first round here.
Absolutely. Now, you did not have a first round pick, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so just before we actually dive into what we think are the best picks or whatever, and it doesn't have to be your best pick, or maybe it will be, but if you were in the first round, who would you have loved to have gotten? It doesn't even have to be the best pick or whatever, just maybe your favorite player in that first round.
Dang. So if I'm saying maybe my favorite player, I think it's got to be Malachi Nelson, quarterback USC. Just set up for so much success there. I think he's going into a great situation. He's not going to play year one, but that's fine. We all know that. Guys like Caleb Williams gained value going into that second year. Actually, he did play year one, so that's a little different situation. But we all knew that year two, he's the guy, right? And Malachi Nelson is that next guy up. It just seems extremely likely that Caleb Williams leaves USC this upcoming season. So, or after this upcoming season. So Malachi, yes, he was the 101 in this draft. As far as maybe who I liked, my favorite pick of this draft, I would say actually all the way at 110, it was just good value because you're getting a tier 1 wide receiver, potentially the wide receiver 1 in this whole class, Jonte Cook, Texas freshman. I just think that that's an exciting pick at 110. So it's great that you're able to hold on that late into the first and still grab a stud. So that's my favorite pick of that first round.
Yeah, it's hard for Malachi to be the favorite pick because, I mean, he's 101. I mean, that's not. I mean, I guess technically he could be, but it's kind of like, oh well, it's Malachi Nelson. But yeah, if I was in that league that you're in, if I was personally in it, I would have taken Jonte Cook at 110. Like, that would have been my pick. I love that pick. I absolutely love that pick because I love the recruit. I love the landing spot. He's got. I mean, he's not like huge or anything, but he's got size. He's got athleticism. I love him as a prospect. And like you said, I mean, he very well could be, or maybe even is, the wide receiver 1 in this class. And, by this time next year, we might be saying, oh yeah, Jonte Cook, he's easily the wide receiver 1 in this class. So I do think there's some other quality wide receivers, but at 110 compared to some of the other ones we're going, let's see, like Zachariah Branch went at 6, Brandon Ennis went at 9. Like those are good, those are quality picks as well. But getting a guy like Jonte at 110, I love that pick.
Yeah, yeah, I really like it as well. It's good value. The only concern with him is he going to get early playing time, but I think he'll at least get on the field, and that's all we should expect out of freshmen. When they do more than that, that's a nice bonus, however, though, that's for sure. But how about your least favorite pick of that first round?
I feel like we might have the same one here because this one's a little wild. I get that people love, maybe not love, but people really are like Deuce Robinson as a prospect, tight end, unknown because he hasn't even committed to a team yet. At least as far as I know, he hasn't. They said like maybe like the end of April or something like that. He was gonna finally make his decision. But the other thing is he hasn't committed to a team because he hasn't even committed to football. We don't even know if he's actually going to play football or not. He's a very well known, like very well renowned baseball player, and so we don't know if he's going to try and play dual sports or or just pick baseball because he's probably a better baseball player than he is football even. So I don't know. He's got great size. I think he has good athleticism as far as I know. Like it's not even hating on the player; it's hating on the unknown in the first round. Like if you waited a round or two, I can probably get on board with picking him there. But man, at 112, I really cannot get behind drafting Deuce Robinson there.
Right, right. It's all about value at that point. So I'll agree with you. I also selected that player as far as maybe my least favorite from that first round, just because so many of them were studs. And then you get to him. It's like a lot of potential, like you said, a lot more uncertainty, honestly. And at the end of the day, it's the tight end position. It's so unpredictable. It's hard to project those guys. You don't know his landing spot, like you already said as well. I just think that at that value, you could have waited maybe late second. I see a lot of supplemental drafts. He's a second to third or even fourth round pick. So that would be my selection there. How about let's move over to second round, unless you have any other thoughts there. And I want to hear your favorite player from that second round.
Yeah, no other thoughts. I think it was pretty chalk in the first round. Beyond that, like not hating on any of the picks. Like I said, there's some good ones, but I definitely love the Jonte pick there. That one was amazing. Shelton Sampson is going to be my pick, and I believe that was your pick, if I remember correctly. Uh, and this one is honestly more that like it's kind of like what I was saying with round one, where everyone kind of went chalk. So it's not even that I absolutely love this pick, but I do like the prospect. And he kind of just stands out a little bit more than maybe some of the other picks that went in that second round. And honestly, he lands in kind of like a wide open wide receiver core. I mean, it's really like Malik Neighbors and then a bunch of maybe players. Like no one that I'm like truly scared of. I think that he could see the field as a true freshman. And, I also like the prospect. I mean, he has quality size, quality athleticism, and quality opportunity. Now, it might not be the most prolific offense in the world, but I think this is still more of a Devy pick than a campus or a C2C pick, where we think that he could actually be a quality NFL player. So you're not necessarily carrying as much in a C2C league. You're still in the first few rounds at the very least, you're still kind of banking on those NFL prospects and not so much, am I going to get 1,600 receiving yards out of this player, like that kind of thing. Maybe we can hope for that, but yeah, I don't know if I see that, especially anytime soon. But yeah, I like the pick here, and like I said, it's not that like it's tiers above the other picks, but I do like this one. It seems to be my favorite.
Hey, I appreciate that. That I did like him. I actually drafted him not long after that Malik Neighbors weapon allegation charge, whatever that was out there. It looks like that might not stick, or that might not be a long-term issue for Neighbors, thankfully, because Neighbors is a good player, but Samson should be that next guy up. But I actually liked a different wide receiver in this round is my favorite pick, and that was at the 203 slot. Jerry Dickey. I actually got sniped, and I was at 204, so I had to trade down to select. Well, eventually, selected my guy there in Shelton Sampson. But Jerion Dickey, Oregon wide receiver, he's a beast. I think he has even more juice compared to Shelton Sampson. So Jerion Dickey, he's a borderline tier 1 wide receiver in this class, and you got him at the 203. I think that's a very nice pick there. I think that's my favorite value slash just favorite pick in general in this round.
Yeah, and I will say, I was talking to you, and I was also talking to Levi, our friend Levi Valentine, that was also in this draft. And I was talking to both of you individually, and you were both looking at Jerry and Dickey there. So maybe that should be the favorite pick of the round, because it seemed like it was definitely a teardrop after that, because everyone was like, "Nope, I'm trading out." I won out, like that kind of thing. Um, I will say it was definitely the easiest pick of the draft or the round, I should say, because I mean it was pretty obvious that he should have gone there. But at the same time, we shouldn't discount that by any means. It was definitely a quality pick. I like it. 5-star prospect. A lot of people are really in love with him there. So I think he's getting some like AJ Brown comps or something like that. Isn't that right?
Yeah, his comps are crazy, and I do get it. We really didn't get to see his full potential with that senior season just because of an injury, but per game his senior season, he was on track to be a stud. I mean, he was 113 yards per game for 22.6 yards per reception. Like big play threat, and at that size of like 6'3", 210-ish, that's pretty impressive for sure. Yeah, and he did it
Yeah.
again his junior season. It's not like we only got to see a little bit of a partial season. It's like 1.5 seasons almost of pretty special production from that size and high caliber recruit.
Yeah. And honestly, like maybe we'll differ here a little bit, and that's perfectly fine. But when I was making my picks of like favorite and least favorite, that kind of thing, I was definitely trying to look at values and whatnot. Like the getting Dickey at the 203 is kind of like the chalk pick for me, like that. So it's not quite the same as maybe like taking a quality player like Samson that I do believe in. And I also know that you definitely took him there because of the news with Neighbors. And I don't think that Neighbors is going to miss much time, if anything. I still think he's a quality prospect, beyond Malik Neighbors.
Yeah, and I can add to that a little bit because it's like how much of my incentive to take him there was really because I thought Malik Neighbors would be suspended. It was a little bit less of that, but more so that was in the news. And I think people would be very interested to see, okay, who is that next LSU stud? And I decided I could not let him fall. So I actually took him ahead of Noah Rogers and Carnell Tate, Ohio State wide receivers, because I thought they would fall to me that next round. I was wrong, but we'll get to the third round here soon enough.
All right. So my least favorite player in this round is Jalen Hale out of Bama. I like the prospect. It's obviously an Alabama wide receiver, but I'd say there's almost 0% chance that he actually sees the field this year or in year one. And like maybe I don't get into the whole year one zero theory as much as the C2C boys, but at the same time, I still understand it and I still appreciate, if a player can get on the field or not, like that kind of thing. So I think especially when you're drafting somebody in the second round of a supplemental draft, I'm really looking for, trying to gain value, see the field, like things like that as soon as possible. And there might be a time like a Malachi Nelson, where I might feel okay with, like knowing there's very little chance he's going to see the field, but I just believe in the talent. I believe in that kind of thing. But when it comes to these wide receivers where we have no guarantee he's going to see the field, even in year 2, year 3, or whenever at Bama, it just becomes really difficult for me to fall in love with it in the second round.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I respect that selection that you had there for least favorite pick. Like you said, even if you don't follow the year 1 0 theory religiously, that's built into models. That's going to be built into your evaluation of a guy going into their second season if they didn't see the field. So, yep, I respect that. I actually didn't go that direction. I went with Hakeem Williams. So he's a wide receiver for FSU. He's also an incoming freshman. He's a 5-star type guy, but I really don't think that both his production or his nuance to the game at all is warranting a 5-star status. I think he's clearly, well, I think he is overrated, and I've heard that amongst quite a few people breaking down rookies or incoming freshmen, I should say. But he was selected at the 204. I just think it was just a bit early for him. He's got a lot of raw talent. there's things to work with there. But is Florida State, are they guys, are they a program that develops all these NFL wide receivers? I don't know. I don't know that I trust them to do that. I think their offense will be fine this year. I don't know how it's going to look in future years, but I'm a little bit worried about how raw Hakeem Williams is and some of the landing spot things there. I also considered Nichols. I don't think that's how you say it, but Harbor, the
I think it's actually
athlete.
just Nicholas. I was talking
Yeah,
about this on the
Nicholas.
Full Tilt Devy pod. I literally think it's Nicholas Harbor.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it is Nicholas Harbor, he's a tight end slash wide receiver. He's just a great athlete. So, whatever he plays, he should be exciting from an athleticism standpoint. But I do get a little bit worried. Again, South Carolina, are they just going to deploy him in some unexciting way as far as a weapon goes? We don't know. But ultimately, I went with Hakeem as a guy that I didn't really love at that value.
Man, I did not expect Hakeem Williams hate here. I'm actually a pretty big fan of his. I get that he might be a little raw, and maybe it's hard to trust FSU because of how they've been, in past what 5, 6, 7 years, whatever. But I mean, I think that they're on the up and up. Whereas like a team like Florida, my Gators are not looking too great. So I you know, I understand not loving the whole idea of the team and everything, but I do think that they are like I said, the team is looking up. And there's some players like Johnny Wilson that I like. Jordan Travis isn't like the worst QB in the history of the world or anything like that. So I think that Hakeem Williams he has like elite athleticism, especially at his size. He's already 6'3", 200 pounds, and he runs 22.2 miles per hour. Like, that's pretty damn exciting. That makes me think of like a Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston's not a good wide receiver, but he's going to be drafted as in the pick 18 in the NFL draft because he's 6'3" and can run pretty damn fast. And he's not even probably as fast as Hakeem Williams. So maybe this one's more of like, I don't truly get into the value play as much, but I'm thinking as a recruit that even if he doesn't become that wide receiver that I want him to become, he could still be that Quentin Johnston level, athleticism athlete, and then he could still get good draft capital, and it doesn't really kill you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's certainly a chance of that. I just don't want to understate how raw he is, and I think that was reflected in his high school production. Like, I get the big play stuff, and the speed at that size is cool, but I mean, he had 18 receptions his senior year. He had 300 some yards, and that's in 7 games. He didn't play like 2 games. Like some guys will put up those numbers in 2 games. No, that was spread over a good chunk of the season. And you go back to his sophomore and junior years, the guy's he's never went over he's 700 receiving yards. He's always been what was it, 200, 600 some, and 300 some for his totals. So I know that high school stats aren't everything, but the guy didn't necessarily have dominant, consistent flashes. He just had flashes. So, anyways, it's mostly value, like you mentioned before. It's not that I hate the player, just where he was selected. But we can get into our next selections here.
Absolutely. And it might be a little early because it was earlier in the round as well. So it could be a little early, but I like the player. Maybe, I haven't gone through a supplemental draft just yet. So maybe I need to actually figure out where I'd be comfortable picking him. But I do like the player. I like the prospect of the player. I just need to figure out if I'm okay with drafting him in like the early to mid second, if that's too early. But let's go ahead and dive into to round 3 here. I think this one's pretty easy for me. You might not agree. I think you've been a little bit, maybe not out, but a little less excited about Dorian Singer than I am. But I love this pick by Levi. It was like clear and obvious. Like I think that he's getting a lot of hate for like no reason beyond the fact that people just want to love Zachariah Branch and oh man, there's another prospect that's going there too, right? I'm trying to remember his name, but like they love
Lemon.
Makai Lemon. Thank you. And so these 5-star recruits, like people are just like, all right, well, Dorian Singer's dead. Like, no, no, he was so good last year. Like he showed that he deserves to be on that field. And then USC was like, yeah, let's get this guy. and they bring him in, and then they bring in 2 5-star recruits, and everyone's just like, oh well, I'm sorry, he's dead. It's like, no, he's not dead. Like I like those players as recruits, but he showed way too much to all of a sudden just be like completely off the field or anything like that. Maybe they'll take over eventually, but remember, this is his junior season. So like I think that he's going to he has a leg up just by having 2 years of playing college football over them. But then on top of that, I think that it's just going to be kind of like we see these big time programs where they let the juniors play, and they bring in the freshmen, they let them trickle in, like that kind of thing. I think we see that with the best programs because they know, like, you're going to get your shot. It's going to be fine. Like the freshmen are going to get your shot. We can get Dorian Singer into the NFL right now, which is going to help our recruiting and all that kind of stuff. And that's why they're going to focus on getting him the ball, beyond the fact that he was just a stud last year, an absolute stud that, I think it's just people didn't truly know his name, and he blew up, and then he went to USC, and then they bring in 2 5-star prospects. And so they're like, oh, well, I didn't know his name last year, so screw him. Like he sucks.
Yeah, no, he was definitely on my list of guys that I was looking at in that range, and I thought it was a good selection. He's not actually my pick here, and I can touch on him a little bit just because I, I was impressed by what he did analytically, and then just watching him, the guy just cannot separate at all. Like, it's really weird. It's the most strange phenomenon, or most strange observation that I've had in quite a while.
Before you continue,
From,
though, I've heard people talking about Marvin Mims not being able to separate, and then dude went out and ran a 4.33 or 4.38. I'm sorry, and so and me. I love you, and you're probably one of the, if not the best film analyzer that I know, and so I'm not trying to hate on you or your analysis whatsoever, but I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder if could it be the QB, the QB play where the ball, he has to track the ball and it slows him down a little bit, like that kind of thing. And I don't do the film analysis, so I'm not saying that you're right or wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying that there's so many other factors that play into it that it's really tough to gauge athleticism and or separation just based off of film.
right, right. So I think that there's limitations there, and I do appreciate that additional context of why we might not have been able to see him in maybe more of a slot role where he's just getting screens, he's getting all sorts of different touches. It just seemed like he was utilized on the outside, and that might have been an issue at Arizona that won't be there at USC. So if the guy's going to go into a crowded situation like that, but with his talent, I there's certainly a good chance that he sticks out as the wide receiver one there. However, saying that, I don't think that he's like the same type of talent as Jordan Addison. We have a little bit of recency bias of like, oh yeah, transfer can come in there, just dominate, and be a potential first round prospect. I don't think Singer's quite there. Now, it'd be interesting to see, I guess, how they stack up 1-to-1 as prospects or analytically. But like I said, I have some question marks with him, and I'm not even saying it's a bad pick. I did like this pick at 303. So those are just a couple of my considerations of like, yeah, is it my favorite of this round? So I will give you my favorite, and that's actually Carnell Tate right before him at 302. And the only reason I say that is because I mean the guy has almost everything that you want uh, from a wide receiver prospect going to Ohio State. Now I would like him to bulk up and become a little bit more of a playmaker, a little bit more physically as well. But those are all things that come with being a wide receiver at Ohio State and just maturing in college in general. You start to build up your body a little bit more and build up a little bit more of that physicality. And I don't really have huge concerns with Carnell Tate as far as being a playmaker. I just want to see a bit more. And but saying that, he landed in the right situation. He's a talented high end 4-star, low end 5-star type of wide receiver. He's got enough size, etc. I liked him. I was really eyeing him up. I was hoping that one of Noah Rogers, Carnell Tate, or Dorian Singer would fall to me, and none of them did in the third. So that was my favorite there.
Yeah, I like the Tate pick. You don't have to convince me on the IMG boys. They're right down the road from me. So, I always kind of fall in love with them. But, he also has like the kick return ability and things like that to where he could get on the field, fairly early, possibly, and not be that year 1-0. So I like the pick. I think that Singer's already proven, and so that's why I lean to that direction. It's not that I hate Tate or anything like that. I like that pick as well, so I can get behind that one for sure. And obviously, it's wide receiver U, so it's very easy. At the same time, we've seen a lot of 4 and 5 star prospects go there and then never see the field, or see the field sparingly, and just get completely washed out by these like true studs like an MHJ or a Negbuka, like that kind of thing. So Tate could be very good and still not see the field. I mean, even Jameson Williams didn't see the field there. It's like, and then look what he did at Bama. So I I get a little nervous about those kind of programs when you just have so many 5 star prospects that even if you truly believe in the talent, it might not matter, so that kind of scares me. And so he's probably a good pick in the third. I definitely don't hate it by any means, but man, I almost just want to let someone else take those guys. Like, and I almost it's gotten to the point where I only want to take like who I believe is the number one prospect, because otherwise I think they might get kind of like washed out, like I said, and now they have to transfer or they sit for 3 years and that kind of thing. And even though they might still be valuable after those 3 years, I don't want to wait 3 years for all that.
Yes, when there's that wealth of talent, sometimes it is that both waiting game, or maybe they have to transfer. Like you said, it might not work out for one reason or another. High risk, high reward there with Tate. But what I will say too, with maybe my least favorite pick of this draft, is the same as yours, I think, right? Petaway, Jaquazi Petaway, Oklahoma.
Jaquaz?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And
Jaquazi?
yes. And he's a fun player, right? He is, and he was actually very highly rated as a recruit. He's been a bit of a faller. I just didn't really love the value, and it all comes back down to that. So that's just why I didn't like him in the third, and he went at the 306. So there were guys after him, the next round after him, etc., that I was like, yeah, I think that I would have taken them over him, or I just would have taken him later in general.
Yeah, and for me, like same pick, Petaway. He has elite speed. I think he was a 10.55 runner in track for the 100 meter. Like he's fast, but just raw as can be. And like we just talked about how like Hakeem Williams and like guys like that are raw. I think that he's even more so. So I think it's a little bit of a reach in the third. I don't know that he's ever going to truly like become a wide receiver. I don't know. It seems less likely. It just seems like he's just a speed guy. Maybe they can turn him into an actual receiver, but I'm not a big believer there.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of guys that I'd probably like in like the 5th round, something like that, like where I feel like you can start really throwing more upside darts. But in the 3rd round, I just really don't love it.
Yeah, yeah, you'll see some of these wide receivers in the 5th round really start going off the board. Jalen Brown, LSU freshman, Jaden Greathouse, Notre Dame freshman, Eugene Wilson, Florida freshman, Nathan Leacock, Tennessee freshman. Like there's all those sorts of dart throws at that point. I think it's a little bit smarter to wait. But at the end of the day, I mean, he was the wide receiver 4 in the entire class for 247 at one point, and then now
Oh wow.
he's fallen quite a bit. And like you said, maybe it's just because he hasn't quite put it all together as far as production in high school. So we'll
I
see.
could be wrong. I maybe I'm thinking of someone else, but I thought I read that he kind of fell off his senior season. Like he was higher his junior year, and
Yep.
then he fell off his senior year. So I don't like that either. That doesn't lead me to believe that all of a sudden he's going to get magically better in college.
Yeah, right, right. Makes you want to hold off a little bit more as far as where you select them.
And that was really the basis of not loving that pick there. But let's go ahead and dive into the 4th. This one's so easy for me, so I'll go ahead and just start here. It's Bucky, baby. Bucky Irving. We talked about him on the Sleepers pod. Man, how did he fall to the 4th round? I don't get it. I don't understand it. I get he's a little undersized, but he's not that small. And I mean, the way these running backs are coming in this year, it seems like everyone's gaining like 10 or 15 pounds. So like Bucky's going to come in at like 210 and everyone's going to be like, wait a second, why didn't we have Bucky Irving? Like, why didn't we draft him? I don't get it. Like, dude has been a stud just about every time he stepped on the field, but he's 194 pounds. So, everyone just hates him. At the very least, you're getting a quality, and this was another Aaron pick, right? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So, yeah. So at the very least, you're getting another quality campus player, like a C2C player. But I really think that you're actually getting like a player with NFL hopeful, like an NFL hopeful player, I should say. And so I think by this time next year, maybe he gains 5 pounds or whatever, and he's a little bit closer to that 200 range. And then people are like, wait a second, this guy's really good, and he's almost 200 pounds, like that kind of thing. And then they're like, well, he's not quite Jahmyr Gibbs, but like maybe he's the next Jahmyr Gibbs. And so he can go from like someone no one's really truly talking about to like someone that's at least on NFL radars, and then you get like what 1,200-1,400 yards, whatever, on the campus side, and then you get a possible NFL stud. I love that pick.
Yeah, and we were talking about this pre-NFL draft, but the way that some of these prospects weighed in gives me a lot of hope for a guy like Bucky Irving because he is, within 6 or so pounds of that 200-pound threshold. Jahmyr Gibbs right there at like 199, 200-ish. Even Zach Evans, he was like 202. It's like there's these guys who are weighing in borderline 200. I think that Bucky could get there a little bit more easily than, let's say, a Devin Chain could have. And, a Chain keeping the weight off because of track, whatever the case was. But at the end of the day, I think that Bucky doesn't really have any incentive to stay small. He just only has the incentive to get bigger and bigger because they want to utilize him in a heavy workload. They don't want to just give him gadget touches or anything like that. Like he's an actual running back. So I appreciate you picking mine there. And I actually went with my own pick for the first time as far as my favorites, because I agree. That's why I took him there. I couldn't wait any longer on Bucky Irving at the 402. And as far as my least favorite in this round, I had to go with Andrew Rappleyea, Penn State tight end. And I don't know that I would draft a freshman tight end this early. That's basically what it comes down to, especially if they're not like the bona fide tight end one in the class, just a future superstar. I just can't quite get behind that. Maybe you like it more. I don't know. You don't seem to like those dart throw freshman tight ends either.
No, we'll get into it later, but yeah, I don't care enough about tight ends. Most of them suck. The best tight ends, like maybe not the best, but a lot of the tight ends that end up going to the NFL end up having like 300 yards total in their career, in their college career. So it's like, why are we going to draft them? They're not going to help you on the campus side, most likely. And then, and then it's just going to be a dart throw 4th round pick on the NFL side. So why the hell am I going to draft a tight end this early?
Yeah, just draft the next Dalton Kincaid. And I make it sound easy because I drafted him in 100% of my leagues this last year. But at the end of the day, it's like go with some of these guys who have these kind of sneaky good production profiles who they hit the thresholds as far as size, athleticism, maybe a big yards per reception. You don't have to go super deep with the metrics even on some of these tight ends to find some trends of like, oh, wow, this guy could be a size adjusted athlete who's actually pretty good at catching the ball. But you do have to do your research for sure. And I think that a lot of the points that you said are valid. It's just a lot of risk. Will they ever do anything in college? We don't really know.
Yeah, and I mean, I honestly I don't even know the player, so I can't truly hate on the pick by any means. I'm just hating on the fact that most of the tight ends don't work out. I know somebody that drafted 2 tight ends extremely early in a C2C startup last year. Like in the first like 2 rounds, they went like tight end, and they're probably hating life right now because they only one of those tight ends actually worked out, and even then, like it probably didn't work out as well as they thought it was. So I love drafting tight ends later on. Like I did a C2C draft last year, a startup draft, and I drafted Jatavian Sanders, JT Sanders, pretty late, like in the 20th round or whatever it was. I love those kind of picks because that's when you're looking at upside, you're looking at athleticism, you're looking at those kind of things. We're talking about the fourth round right now. Like I just it's a completely different world. I had a different pick just because I really don't know the tight ends enough to, like I said, to truly hate on it, even though I just went off for 2 minutes about it. But I I think that I went with Quentin Joyner out of USC. I This is more of less so of me knowing the player and like really looking at the player and that kind of thing as a recruit and trusting the boys at Campus to Canton because it seems like they're kind of all out and they're like and they really believe that he's going to have to probably transfer out at some point to like really get onto the field. I don't really know like too much about him. I just know that while he seems athletic and that kind of thing, that maybe he isn't the actual best running back, and so he might not truly see the field when you have like pretty decent players, good players, ahead of him already at USC.
Yeah, I don't mind that pick at all, just because I also have another incoming freshman going to USC slightly higher. So I actually like Quentin Joyner a decent amount, but like you said, there's competition there. Is he going to see the field? That's all legitimate concerns. So that early, I mean, I don't hate the pick by any means, but I also went with the other USC running back a little bit later in this draft, and I like that pick more. But of course, I'm biased, right? So Quentin Joyner, he's a top 10 running back in this class for me, though I think I may have to move him down if I don't start hearing that he's impressing in, let's say, the summer, for example.
Yeah, and that's more what it is. Not every single one of these is like, oh, I absolutely hate this pick. It's more that like I think you could have waited a round or two, like that kind of thing. And so that's why I decided, like you're not quite getting the value of the pick there. But let's go ahead and move into round 5, and it's actually a player that you recently mentioned, in Nathan Leacock for me as my favorite pick of the draft, or of not the draft, favorite pick of the round here. Um, it's really more of like the Tennessee offense, like who- everything that's going on there. You have Joe. Why can I not think of his last name?
Joe Milton throwing the
Milton.
ball.
Milton.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
Joe Milton.
offense, right?
Yeah, Joe Milton, the offense, everything about it, and then you have Nicholas Iamaleava, however the hell you say his last name, coming in behind him, and so I love the prospects of this prolific offense, and then you have a not the best wide receiver core in the world. I know that Aaron's a pretty big, maybe not big, but like he likes Squirrel White. Some people seem to really think that Brew McCoy's a thing. I cannot get behind that, but that's why I think that he could easily get on the field pretty early, possibly by the end of the season, like that kind of thing. I'm not saying it's going to be day one. I'm not saying he's going to hit 1,200 yards this year or anything like that. But I think in the 5th round, like he's a solid prospect, and like he has quality size and really good speed as well, like athleticism to boot. And everything just leads me to believe that like he could easily get on the field and show us enough to where he's going to gain value and possibly become like get on the NFL radar at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's completely fair. Like I also selected him. I am kind of trying to rethink that a little bit, but it's not because I think he's bad. It's just more so, and I think I don't think I've talked about this yet on the draft, but last year, there was a guy who outproduced him in high school, and this year, Leacock really took over. Right, he put up amazing statistics. He was still outproduced by the guy's previous year stats. So, and I think that was Wesley Grimes, who ended up at Wake Forest and was almost a year 1-0, not quite, I think. But basically, Wesley Grimes was better than Leacock in high school and better than Leacock's best season, though Leacock even played more games. Like that, I thought that was interesting that this seems like it's almost a system type of production thing from high school. But we can't deny that Leacock was explosive. Maybe Grimes was a really good player, and there's a lot of factors for why freshmen don't always excel out there, like competition wise, coaching wise, etc. So I'm still excited about Leacock. Better offense. as far as landing spot goes, and then probably better speed, right? He's just a better athlete than Grimes was. So ultimately, I like him. I think he needs some development. So is he going to get on the field right away? I don't know. But I mean, Squirrel White got, what was it, 400, 500 receiving yards as a true freshman, very undersized guy. And I think that Squirrel White's going to be able to carve out a role. But like you said, past that, there's some uncertainty there. So Leacock is a good selection in this round ultimately. And I'll still go by that, I guess. But as far as least favorite one, I actually said Johnny Wilson. So I know that that's going to cause a fight here on the podcast.
I'm out. I'm
Yeah,
out.
right.
I quit.
and I think that you mentioned an interesting, not even a comp, but it's like Hakeem Williams going to FSU, Johnny Wilson at FSU. And I think there's actually some similarities there. Not that Johnny Wilson, though, is that level of athlete, but I just view him as kind of a raw guy. And I know he's been pretty efficient. He's not a bad player by any means, but he's not elite. I don't know that I see a high end ceiling or day one or day two draft capital in his future. He's just not quite at that level. So he's a solid player, enough to perk our interest in Devy and C2C leagues and in analytical models, or even if you're watching some of his highlights, but not quite enough yet, at least, to really perk my interest as a day two type of guy. So Johnny Wilson, what pick was that at the 507? Was my kind of least favorite. But again, I don't hate the player, just more the value.
I think you got to choose one, buddy. You either don't like Johnny Wilson or you don't like Hakeem Williams.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think that
apparently I don't like either one of them
yeah,
that much,
apparently you don't
right?
like either, but I'm
Yeah.
saying like one of them is probably going to be on the field and producing for this team. But I will give you that I feel like they're kind of redundant. Where I feel like they kind of play the same role. And you're saying that maybe Johnny Wilson's not the same athlete. Well, that's probably true. We've had discussions in the background about yards per reception, and man, Johnny Wilson's 20.9 yards per reception, that shows athleticism to me. I know it's not a perfect thing, but I have done a little bit of research now where I've looked into it, and yards per reception does correlate to high 40 times or good 40 times, I should say. So I think that Johnny Wilson's maybe underrated as a receiver, or underrated as an athlete at the very least. And so maybe it actually hurts my Hakeem Williams love, but at the same time, like maybe because of that, Hakeem Williams won't see the field. But maybe that's because Johnny Wilson sees the field this year, continues to see the field and does his thing, and then possibly moves on to the NFL, and then we get Hakeem Williams, that kind of thing. I don't know. I can't hate on the pick in the fifth round. I like Johnny Wilson enough to where the fifth round, I think there's some NFL prospects there. Obviously, he could put up some actual campus points this year as well. I really don't mind it there in the fifth. I think, if you just truly don't believe in the player, then obviously it's going to make sense to hate that one. But I think that he's going to continue doing what he was doing this past year, and possibly even more, because I feel like, if anything, Florida State's probably getting better this year than they were even last year. They've been taking strides.
Yeah, I think
Making strides.
Yeah, exactly. The CFF angle kind of makes sense to me. But if you want a guy, for me, who's only a CFF type asset, draft him at the end of your draft. Like in the 15th round, I got a guy who I think, well, he is ranked by some of the C2C guys from like the CFF sphere as like a top, I think it's top 24 option or top 30 option at least. It's like, get your CFF studs late, in my opinion. And I think we differ a little bit on the upside, but I guess I will also end with like, how many 6'7" stud NFL wide receivers for our fantasy teams are out there. Like that's just not
Yeah.
really, yeah, it's just not something
I
that we ever see.
you gotta love NFL analysis. It's like, oh, Josh Downs, 5'9", he couldn't possibly be good. Johnny Wilson, 6'7", couldn't possibly be good. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think the NFL's though go in the opposite direction. They want the Josh Downs, they want the Wandale Robinsons, they want those smaller guys who just give them so many options. They're going away from the 6'7". Like I understand, like let's not write people off solely because of their size, but that's just a little bit extreme. But that's just my opinion.
No, it definitely is, and I know, like, I've seen, people talking about it that have done research on it, and there's very few, if any, like, players over 6'6" that have ever done anything as far as wide receivers, have ever done anything in the NFL. So I get it's like a long shot and all that kind of stuff, but man, I really, just like with Josh Downs or Zay Flowers or whoever else, Wandale Robinson, like, I really try not to get into the size talk. And so if I'm not going to do it for the 5'9" guys, why the hell am I going to do it for the 6'7" guy? Just because it doesn't happen often doesn't mean it won't happen. And so, like that's I guess my argument. And if they're doing good things in college, then I'm perfectly fine with with falling in board and falling in love with them and falling in line with them. But yeah, man, I see athleticism with Johnny Wilson, and I don't think I hear that when I hear anyone else talking about him, even though there's very few people actually talking about him. It's just more like, oh yeah, like it's just Johnny Wilson. Who cares?
It would be a fun narrative to see if he's like the maybe more not more explosive, but like a Drake London type player. Like that's really interesting. But I don't see any of the same, I guess, nuance quite yet. So he does need to take a step forward. That's a big step
Not to
forward.
mention, now that I'm thinking about it, these are college heights. Dude's going to be like 6'4.5" by the time he actually gets to the NFL. So we are going to have to actually be concerned about any of this. All
Love
right,
that.
so I completely at this point we went off the rails. We went off on the tangent here, so I don't even remember where we are. Oh, so okay, my least favorite player of the round is Eugene Wilson, and I he's a small, like not overly athletic wide receiver that is on a team that doesn't have a QB and has a new coach. And if you didn't know, they're on the Gators. So I just man, I mean, I guess at this point I'm a jaded Gator fan. It's just like they cannot get a QB. They cannot. They had him. They had Jaden Richard, right? Jaden Richard, is that right? Doesn't
Rashada,
sound right.
yep.
Rashada. Yeah, thank you. So they had Jaden Rashada and they screwed it up. Like maybe they offered him too much money. Maybe I have no idea, but whatever it was, they screwed it up, and they still have no one. They have like Jack Miller. Like that's not a QB. That's not a QB name. Like they they have just no one, and it's so sad. They're going to be bad for the longest time. They're going to be bad forever because I don't know. They can recruit defensively, everything, like they're so good at that kind of recruiting, but for whatever, I don't know what it is, they cannot recruit a QB. I don't get it. They're in Florida. They cannot recruit a QB. It doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah, I don't want anything to do with Eugene Wilson here.
Yeah, I get it. There are intriguing things about him as a wide receiver. I do have to admit. I mean, he was the wide receiver 5 for On3, which is an up and coming recruiting service that scored out better than Rivals and 247 and ESPN, based on the data that the guys at C2C have put together. So I thought that was very interesting. And he was like a top 35 overall player in the entire class. And you're talking about a guy who was going off his senior year, but we didn't get to see that next step, just because he got injured. And he's very fast guy, undersized, admittedly, but a playmaker that should be something kind of interesting for Florida. So even if there isn't a great quarterback play, I just do wonder if he could be an outlet. So I agree that he probably could have been selected later, but at the end of the day, as an intriguing prospect and at least a solid high-end 4-star player, I don't know how much further he was going to fall there. But I get the hesitancy, the yeah, the lack of trust in what Florida's doing from a passing game standpoint.
It's
Yep.
man, every year it's just like, oh, this is going to be the year, and I think I follow, if you know Adam Lewis on Twitter. He's a big Gator guy, and he does a lot with like QB prospects and things like that. He was big into, I think it was Carlos Del Rio, or is it Del Rio? Something like that. And he was on the Gators, And so he kind of got me excited about that player. And then because of Anthony Richardson, he had to actually, transfer out. And I'm just like, really? So like the guy that we're actually excited about had to transfer out because of Anthony Richardson. Like, yeah, okay, that's fantastic. So I am no longer excited about QB prospects for the Gators until I really need like a 5-star, like can't miss prospect to go there before I'll probably ever believe again. But I just realized we're almost at the hour mark and we've only gotten through 5 rounds, which is, I mean, that's what we do. So it's perfectly fine. And at least you guys, hopefully you guys are appreciating the analysis and the banter and all that kind of good stuff. But let's go ahead and dive into the 6th round here. And I think I started the last round. Why don't you start us off here?
Okay. And I've went back and forth on this. There was a lot of players here that I really liked. I didn't want to select my own guy, so I kind of eliminated that. I actually had 2 guys in this round, and I was tempted to pick, I guess, either one of them as my favorite. If I had to go with a third one, so just eliminating my 2 guys, Jeremiah Cobb, Auburn was the last one, but the more I think about it, he's just so undersized going to Auburn. And he's a guy who came into high school, or at least I think it was a sophomore year. He's like 165 pounds. It's like 165 pounds is not going to get it done at the running back position. And I get that he's already bulked up. He's like 185 or 180. Do I believe it based on everything that I've seen? I don't even know. I think the guy could come into college at 180, yes, but bigger than that, I'm skeptical. And he really lacks that frame. I just want guys who project well for the NFL if they're going to an Auburn like school. And he's not going to be a CFF stud, most likely. He's probably not going to be a 3-down NFL prospect as a back. I actually started to fade the Jeremiah Cobb pick when I was thinking about it more. So I will go with my guy. I know I just went back and forth with like, do I give myself a little pat on the back? And I will. I'll go Dante Dottle, Oregon running back. And just because I think that he's got a 3-down, well, at least he's got that workhorse size and he's got some athleticism. I know his long speed, like he gets caught from behind sometimes, but man, he's got good burst. And that's something that really matters. And as far as projectable comps for him, I mean, look at AJ Dillon. Like he could easily be that type of back, in my opinion, at least. He's very dominant high school back, and he's going into a system, should have a good offensive line. Give me Dante Dottle. He was at the very end of the 6th round, so 6'11". He's a high-end 4-star for almost every single recruiting service. He was really falling in this draft, so I liked that one.
I think there's like a Pac-12 deficiency in my recruit or in my analysis, and like it just gets really difficult for me to fall in love with an Oregon player. Although like I know a lot of people do, like I feel like people are a lot higher on Troy Franklin than I am, and players like that. So I didn't pick this as my favorite pick, but I also say like a 6'1", 210 pound player that can also run 21.5 miles per hour. That's not too shabby. So I like the athleticism with the size, like that kind of thing. Especially as a true freshman, like that's great. So I get the pick. I like it. I don't know if it was my favorite. I think that I actually kind of, this one was more difficult. Like this round was more difficult, like to choose who the favorites were. There weren't any that like truly stuck out to me. Oh my God, this is like, you have to pick this player. So I went ahead and picked Aiden Williams out of Ole Miss. I think that I like him as a prospect, and honestly, like he has a decent shot to get onto the field year one and do something. And like I said, that's what I'm looking for with these prospects. Can they get on the field? Can they gain value? That kind of thing. It's nothing truly that like I love about the player, by any means, but we're in the 6th round here. And that's why I kind of lean towards like, I feel like he can actually get on the field, gain value, that kind of thing as my deciding factor there.
Yeah. And that's one of mine too. So I guess we did cover those this round. Yeah, I'm a big Aiden fan.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah. No, but I'm a big Aiden fan. He really seems like he's just not talked about enough, and maybe it's because we're not excited that much at this point by Ole Miss wide receivers, which is actually kind of silly looking at the history of how many wide receivers have
Right?
gone there.
Yeah, a 4-star prospect at Ole Miss. Like, oh, I couldn't possibly like him.
Yeah, and high-end 4-star, right? And a very good
Yeah.
producer in high school. So there's just and he's got the size that you want, like 6'2", 200 plus. I don't know. I like it as well, but obviously I'm biased with that. But I'll also add that I think that Dante Dottle, he might be 220 when it's all said and done after this summer. Like I think he's just got a little bit stronger and
Was
stronger
he gonna
from
be
every
250 by the time he enters the NFL? Like, the dude's a beast.
Yeah, I mean he's kind of a beast there, but we'll see.
I
But
guess so.
let's get to your least favorite if you had one here.
Yeah, this is actually my last least favorite. After this, it got really difficult to have a least favorite in the round. Like they all kind of suck. So, like why have a least favorite? But yeah, this is my last one. It's Ryan Niblett. Texas is just too crowded. There's just way too much going on there for me to be taking a guy like he's a raw receiver. Like he's not a quality wide receiver, route runner, like all that kind of stuff coming out of high school. He has to learn how to be a receiver, whether he's athletic or not, like that kind of thing. I don't love that in a crowded room. Like if you give me that on a FSU, okay, maybe we can work with it. You give me that at Texas, I'm all out.
Yeah, I get it. And honestly, he had a pretty good senior season. I thought he actually improved on some things, but like you said, is he going to see the field? I know he's super athletic. Maybe they're going to use him in some sort of hybrid role. That's just not intriguing to me. So I wish he ended up somewhere else. And same with DeAndre Moore, because DeAndre Moore, he was selected in the 6th round here. I wanted to select him, but it's the same exact like copy paste. And I like DeAndre Moore quite a bit more than I like Ryan Niblett. So that
Yeah, I
makes
like
Ryan Niblett.
more.
Yes. So that makes Niblett fall even more down that depth chart. Will Texas see it that way? I really don't know. Niblett is athletic, but ultimately, yeah, I kind of like that least favorite selection. I'll agree with you there. We don't need to get into um, any other players in that round.
All right, and like I said, I'm basically done. I will say really quick, in the next round we had 3 tight ends go, and so I chose as my like worst picks the tight ends. I have no analysis whatsoever on that, but they're tight ends. Maybe they're high upside guys, and maybe I'm wrong here, and I'm perfectly fine being wrong. I'm just you chose tight ends, so yeah, you lose.
That's fair. Yeah, I didn't get blown away by the tight ends. And as far as like my least favorite in round 7 is a guy that I've heard a lot of love for. It seems to all be originating from some of the C2C guys. This isn't a knock on anybody or any type of analysis. This is just more so a me. I don't like Caden Fagan, who's going to Illinois. He's a big back. He's kind of just this athlete out there. And I don't know. I mean, did Illinois suddenly become like running back you or something like that? Like, I think that there's opportunity there. So there's vacated touches for sure. Could he be a solid CFF back? Yeah. Do I see anything special though from an NFL upside? And I just don't ultimately. So I think it was a bit early, but I understand when he's getting hyped up, you got to get this guy if you have some hope for him. So at 702, didn't necessarily love that pick. But I did love Jaron Hamilton, so Alabama wide receiver at 7'11". You talked earlier about not really liking Hale. Well, if you didn't like Hale in the second, might as well go with a guy who's very explosive going to Alabama as a true freshman at 7'11". Like, that's a good place to take that dart throw. And maybe he does become some guy who just somehow emerges in a relatively crowded, but yet there's some opportunity there to earn a role at Alabama. So that was one guy that I don't actually love any of the picks necessarily in this round. Um, but that was the guy I went with.
Yeah, and I get it. I mean, choosing a Bama guy in the 7th round, not a terrible idea. And once again, I'm right there with you. Like, I don't think that I absolutely loved the players in this round by any means, but I give me Chris Culver, UNC, a big fast wide receiver tied to Drake May. Yeah, sign me up all day, baby. There's not all that many players besides like Devontae Walker that really scare me on that offense anyway. So like he could absolutely see the field. You're talking about a 7th round pick that could see the field in year 1, and has the ability to possibly be a like an NFL wide receiver, like that kind of thing when it's all said and done. So I maybe things aren't great after Drake May. Like obviously, like there's some question marks beyond May. But for this year, if we could possibly see him on the field, he could get some hype.
Yeah, that'd be super fun. I'd love to see Chris Culliver get a role as a true freshman. It's kind of crowded, but at the same time, like you said, it's not established talent necessarily. Even Tez Walker, it's not a sure thing that he walks in and is just some sort of stud. It seems like he's going
Tez
to
is
be the
getting a
lead
lot
guy.
of hype.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
getting a lot of hype out of spring camp. So I don't
right?
know. Maybe he is
He,
proven here.
yeah. But I mean, at the end of the day, we can't guarantee that he's just going to be a superstar and relegates everybody else just to like small roles. I don't know where I heard this. I heard hype, yes, but I also heard some other things saying like I don't know what it was. It was something weird, but it wasn't bad. Like oh, he had some sort of off the field issue. No, it was just something kind of strange with spring practices with him. So maybe I'll have to go look and see if that was just nothing at all.
I,
But yeah,
I literally listened to a podcast today, and they were talking about how Tez Walker is like killing it in spring practices. So that's all I've truly heard of, like recent talk. But so I can't bank on it by any means. The only thing I will say is that our boy Dirty Mike really opened my eyes when I thought that Tez Walker was a junior, and then he pointed out that he was a JUCO transfer and that he was actually a fifth-year player, and that's when I fell out of love, at least as much love with Devontae Walker as I was in, because that profile as a junior is pretty damn sexy. That profile as a JUCO transfer fifth-year player, it's okay.
yeah, I feel you there. Let's see what are the next impressions that you had?
Honestly, I didn't love the 8th round. I didn't like fall in love with too many players, but I think that Dominic Lovett did enough last year that, going to Georgia, obviously it's not like this prolific offense or anything like that to where we can truly get excited, but I think that he did enough to where you should draft him in the 8th round and have him on your squad. He has like maybe some small possibilities of being an NFL wide receiver, things like that. And, he could possibly produce as well for your CDC squad, be a bye week fill-in, like that kind of thing. So I really don't mind him here in the 8th. There wasn't anyone that like truly jumped out at me, but who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, that would be cheating a little bit by mentioning my guy, but I'll go with it. Yeah, I love it. Absolutely. So I'll just agree with you there, but I'll say my least favorite was actually another Georgia wide receiver. 2 slots ahead of Dominic Lovett was Lad McConkey. And McConkey, as far as production goes, has never really done what Dominic Lovett has. And Lovett was going against good competition too. It's not like he came from some small MAC school or something like that. Like he's used to playing against SEC competition, including Georgia. And there's a reason they brought him in because he was very good this last season, and he didn't play the whole season. He missed the last couple of games. Dominic Lovett, certainly at this point in the draft, it's like, is he a CFF threat? Probably not. Is he an NFL guy? I think there's a decent chance of that. Can't guarantee it, but I'm honestly saying that there's a decent chance that he is. And if you like Luther Burden, you got to love what Dominic Lovett did this last year, whether you blame it on just being in a certain role or otherwise. Um, yeah, you got to give Lovett his credit as well, especially when he's going up in competition. Well, actually, not really going up, but he's just stepping it up into Georgia, which they're going to be in the playoffs. They're going to be there's going to be a lot of attention, and you shouldn't let maybe this last year sour your taste too much on, oh, well, Georgia can't put out an NFL wide receiver. Well, what do you mean? They just put out George Pickens, and Pickens didn't even do anything his final season in college because he's injured. So it's like Georgia, I don't know, NFL is not just going to disqualify you because you went to Georgia and you didn't go for 1,500 receiving yards. That's my little spiel. Sorry for the tangent on Dominic Lovett. Hopefully not too much hate from McConkey, but I didn't love that spot there either. Get it?
Yeah. Yeah, McConkey doesn't do it for me, especially like you said, when a guy like Lovett's still there. So I'm right there with you. Once again, I don't have any more like players that I guess it was McConkey, but like I don't have any like true players that I absolutely hate here. it gets really difficult because most of them are not going to be great picks. So it's kind of difficult to be like, oh yeah, yours is the worst, not great pick. But that's why we're gonna more focus, especially at the hour and 10 mark here. We're gonna more focus on just the quality picks. In the ninth round, I actually had Musa Muhammad. I think that's how you pronounce it. And honestly, like I really like taking a shot on like a player like this here, especially in the ninth round. He hasn't like truly broken out, but he flashed, and we know that there was a transition period there in Texas A&M, and he could definitely stand to take a big jump this year with the full year of Connor Wegman. Aaron's a big fan of Wegman. I am as well, and so like whereas the offense itself might not be prolific, I think that at the very least we could get a little more consistency, a little more like high end play. And then at that point, Muhammad could definitely take a step forward. And so taking him here in the ninth, you could at the very least gain some value.
Yeah, honestly, that took me by surprise. I did not know that you were into him, but I actually like it. I was unsure who I was going to select in that round as far as my least favorite. He actually crossed my mind just because I don't know enough about him and I don't necessarily see anybody else touting him, but that's a very good find. So I appreciate that one, John. As far as my
I actually
favorite,
have him ahead of Lad McConkey from the
yeah,
last round. So
absolutely. I will say Keon Brown, who is a guy that you and I have talked about. Keon Brown, I don't necessarily love him as a prospect, but I think at the 901, we talked about Petaway earlier, and he was drafted what, round 4 or something like that in this draft. It's like, I don't know. Keon Brown has just as much of a chance of being that wide receiver 1 at Oklahoma in the future. That's intriguing in the ninth round. So, and what do you say? Petaway was
it
the
was
third
actually
round.
round 3.
Yeah. So exactly, Keon Brown here in the ninth, by my buddy Drew. That was a good pick.
Yeah, I like that one. Let's go ahead and jump into the 10th round. Another player that we touched on recently that you were kind of surprised by. I don't know if you actually went out of your way to watch any kind of film or anything like that. But my favorite pick of the round is CJ Donaldson. I actually think that he should have gone a little bit earlier, to be honest. I get that he was recruited as a tight end, and like it's not the like normal transition into being a running back, like that kind of thing. But he showed a lot as a running back last year. He showed burst, he showed athleticism, he showed everything that I kind of like to see on top of being a quality NFL size, if not like a superior NFL size, that kind of thing. So obviously, I'm sure he's raw. I'm sure if you watch the film, you're going to see certain things that maybe you don't like, but hopefully you would see the burst and the athleticism and still be on board.
Yeah, I get it to a degree as far as like if you just look at the production. I think a little bit size wise, he scares me at 6'2", 240. And again, you said it earlier. We don't want to disqualify
That's only
anybody.
6 foot 221 by the time he makes it to the NFL. He'll be fine.
I don't know, man. Is it keep gaining weight there? He's going right back to the tight end position like he was coming out of high school.
Right.
So, new coaching staff. I don't know how they're going to utilize him in that offense. Hopefully, they keep him at running back, or hopefully they keep using him like he did. And there is also competition there in the backfield. I'm not saying that the competition's better than him, but if it's any sort of a split with Jalen Anderson, I'm not saying it will be, but Anderson was a good recruit as well.
No, he was good as well, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Anderson was efficient. So I think it could be a bit more of a split. And Donaldson, for being a tight end guy, was not like this great receiving back. I think he had, the 3.0 yards per reception on 9 receptions his freshman year. I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see what happens there. But again, I've referenced this in the show so far. Is he a CFF guy? I don't think he's going to be a CFF stud for you. He's not going to be a difference maker, in my opinion, or my projection this year, at least for CFF. And is he an NFL guy? I'm leaning towards no at this point, but I won't close the book on it. I was actually starting to consider him because, well, I respect your work. And I was like, dang, I know John would be so mad if this guy slid. And then he ended up getting taken. So I do understand why at this rate you would take a shot on him.
No, yeah, clearly you didn't hear me because I said round 10. You obviously thought that we're still talking about round 3 here, but, yeah, in round 10, yeah, CJ Donaldson is a great pick. I don't care if he's just CFF. I mean, like, I have him ranked to where he could easily be a non or like an NFL player, like, he kinda is like in that, like Ty J Spears kind of realm from this year, like that kind of thing. Not comping the players by any means. I'm just saying like that's kind of where I have them like ranked around, like that kind of thing. So I mean, if you like Ty J Spears or players like that, then maybe you should get on board with CJ Donaldson here, especially in the 10th round.
Yeah, he's just such a funky eval. It's really weird, but maybe he will end up being a bit smaller than what. Thankfully, that would be ideal, right? If he actually comes in smaller, it's kind of rare that we say that with these backs. But he's not Derrick Henry. He can't do it at 6'2", 240. He needs to be a little bit slimmed down from there, in my opinion. But as far as some of my
Oh,
interesting,
going back to your
oh yeah,
boy Keaton Fegan, like he's 6'3", 240 as well. So you want to talk about Derrick Henry? Like, holy crap, is a true freshman coming in as 240? That's a little wild.
yeah, yeah, and apparently I have a type that I don't necessarily like because I didn't like vegan there either. Um, but how many times do you actually see them being prolific backs quite at that size? They have to be special, like we know that King Henry is. But as far as other guys, what round are we in here? Are we at 10?
10. Yep.
Yeah, I put Curtis Rourke, QB Ohio, just because he's a CFF stud, assuming that he comes back healthy. And my least favorite was a tight end, Caden Priestcorn for Ole Miss. I know people see Ole Miss and they get excited from a tight end standpoint. I mean, Michael Trigg is still there, and it's Ole Miss, and it's tight end, especially it's a tight end coming from Memphis, I believe. So just not a lot to be excited about, in my opinion. But that's enough tight end talk. We don't need to get into that. What are your thoughts on round 11?
All right, so this is actually my last player. After this, like I didn't care enough about any of these players to truly like you do a little more with the recruits and stuff like that. So I'm sure you probably have a couple players that you still like. I truly didn't care enough to say this guy made a better pick than that guy, like that kind of thing. But this one was clear and obvious. It also kind of pissed me off that it took this long for him to go off the board, and so that's why I just quit after that. Like I'm not even going to pick any more players. Jordan Tyson in the 11th, like we just got done talking about Jordan Tyson with Mike 2 weeks ago, and and he's still going in the 11th. Like, oh, man, actually, I think I think this draft ended before our pod came out, so hopefully that's why. But man, I talked enough about Jordan Tyson last time that where I don't need to go like into full detail here. But dude is just too good, too explosive on an up and coming offense to where he should probably be going ahead of the 11th round.
Yes, and though I did plenty of trading in this draft, so I can't completely absolve myself. I didn't have a ninth or a 10th round pick, and Jordan Tyson was as a top two option in my queue when he got selected at the 1101. So I was like, well, shoot, there, there goes my options there as far as hoping that he'd fall. Probably naive of me to think that he would just keep falling forever, right? After what he did. I did. What made me hesitate to trade up for a guy like that, all the change going on there. I actually already drafted a wide receiver from Colorado. Now, you might be surprised to hear me call this guy a wide receiver, but Travis Hunter quite a bit earlier in the draft, which I know some people think it's too much risk, right? How is that a different risk than some of these Ohio State wide receivers, which we just said not all of them will make it. Quite a few of these guys will never be in the league. Well, I just took that big of an upside pick a little bit later in Travis Hunter, except we already know that he's at least flashed well at the college level. Different college level. I guess I won't even get into that, but we know that Travis Hunter is one of the most talented wide receivers out there. If he does dedicate to that position, he's definitely going to be the number one at Colorado. And then also, I was looking into Jordan Tyson, and it looks like he's not going to play this spring. So, new coaching staff probably won't be able to see him because he's still injured, unfortunately. I really hope that that injury doesn't cost him time this fall. And I don't have any insider information on what injury it was or how long his rehab's going to be. So those were the only reasons I didn't trade up. But honestly, that was an excellent pick, one of my favorites. And I'm not even going to single out one guy in this round. I'm just going to list off some guys, and I can give you my final thoughts on this draft, I suppose. But in round 11, Jordan Tyson, Colorado wide receiver, awesome pick. I liked my own selection of Jamorian Wilcox, running back Kentucky. I think he's potentially the guy of the future there. At 11:03, LaQuint Allen, running back Syracuse, great value there, potentially a workhorse type guy. 11:05, Seydou Traore, tight end Colorado. He was a really good tight end this last year, who's just recently learned how to play football in that position. He could be really interesting at Colorado as well. I selected Lenora Sellers, QB South Carolina. Big time rushing upside as a true freshman quarterback guy. I really liked Devin Mockabee as well in this round. So 11:07, running back Purdue. He flashed pretty well actually for a freshman, and I like what he was doing there. And then there was also a tight end selection, Lawson Luck. Is it Lawson Lucky, tight end Georgia? I just think that sometimes when you're getting a Georgia tight end that late in the draft, maybe that's where you start drafting some of these freshman guys. That's a little bit more palatable compared to like the 4th, 5th round, etc. And then there was Brady Hunt, tight end, in this round too. Not that like a Ball State tight end is going to be an NFL stud, but ultimately, if you get your CFF starter at the end of round 11 for the tight end position, that's not so bad. So I thought there was lots of underrated talent in this round. And it's not really
Yeah, I
something.
like that. I like
Go ahead.
I like Mockabee there. If it wasn't for Jordan Tyson being in the round, I probably would have picked him as my favorite there. So I definitely like that pick as well. I don't get into all the tight ends and all that kind of stuff. I know Hudson Card had some love at some point. I'm not a big fan, but like there's some decent picks there in the round.
Yes, and I'm not going to go through the rest of these rounds because, like John said, there's not necessarily a lot of guys where you can have clear conclusions from. Was that a good pick, bad pick? It's like, get your own guy, get your favorite flyers, maybe your breakout freshman or deeper sleeper breakout freshman or breakout upperclassmen. It's like, get your CFF guys if you like. But I will point out, as far as a strategy piece for C2C leagues, it seems like this 15th round was just loaded with guys who are like CFF upside. And these guys probably fell too long, like Jalen White, Georgia Southern running back. I mean, he was a stud this last season as far as CFF production. You look at Nate Noel, Appalachian State. Well, now his competition's left, and he's been really, really solid in the past. If he gets a large role, it sounds like it's going to be a run-heavy Appalachian State team. Nate Noel could be a stud for CFF. DeCorian Clark, Alex Adams, Jordan Curley, Jamari Thrash, Jamal Banks, like these guys are all CFF wide receivers going in this last round. And you can tell everybody kind of had that same mindset of like, let me just get one last guy to boost my scoring lineup each week. And if the goal is to win the game, I thought about this. Did I wait too long to start taking some CFF flyers too? Because if the goal is to win your campus side, yes, you want a good steady trickle of talent onto your NFL squad, but ultimately we play to win the game. We try to make some money in these money leagues. Those are kind of smart guys to be starting to select later in your draft, especially if you didn't get them early. And I recommend going after the NFL upside guys early, and maybe in the late rounds, that's when you just hammer out the CFF guys. But any other thoughts from this draft or strategy wise, John?
No, honestly, like I'm thinking of like a Day Hunter, those kind of guys that really helped my C2C squad, last year. And, it's probably, similar things here with a Jalen White or some, any of these other players. So I definitely get that. And I guess at this, you would assume that round 15 is going to be mostly campus players anyway. But like you said, maybe there's just a certain amount that you're like, well, man, I probably would have taken this guy in the 13th round and he's here in the 15th, like that kind of thing. And so you trade back in and then, yeah, okay, I'm going to have to cut 10 players at some point, but I have 4 months, like that kind of thing. And I can learn what's going on. I can figure out what's going on before I cut players, put players on IR. I mean, players go on IR from spring, from spring practice. So like, you might think that you have to cut 10, and then by the time your actual cuts come around, you have to cut 4, like that kind of thing. Not that you want players to get hurt, but it could actually benefit your squad by doing it that way.
Absolutely. And for people who listen to the podcast, they know that John is newer into the CFF sphere, the C2C specific roster building, all those things. But his team had a lot of success last year, and that's from you know tweaking his model along the way too. He was first as far as the regular season standings in our league, 17-3. So yeah, there's a lot of truth to that. It's like you got to get some guys to score well for your team, however you go about that process. So
Yeah, and I
but
still had
yeah,
Jahmyr Gibbs and Blake Corum, and I had like quality NFL players as well. But man, I'll tell you what, there was plenty of times where I was starting a Day Hunter or oh crap, I can't
Xavier
think of the guy's.
Hutchinson, right? Xavier
Xavier
Hutchinson was on
Hutchinson was
there.
a big guy. I mean, he was huge on my team. I started, I think Kobe Hudson, who you always laughed about whenever I talked about him. But
Oh
I
yeah.
started Kobe Hudson a few times, and a couple times it was great, and he got me like 20, 30 points, and a couple times he got me like 4 points. So it wasn't always perfect, but there was a couple, like you said, I was 17-3 in the regular season. There was a couple of weeks where I won with those like dual bye weeks and stuff like that. There was a couple weeks where I won with the Xavier Hutchinsons, the Day Hunters, the Kobe Hudsons, like in my starting roles, and Daquan Finn, um, players like that. I even started Chance Nolan at one point. Like these
All right,
these
all right.
players that.
Let's not talk any further. No, I'm just
Yeah, yeah.
but
But you know
but
what? I was 17
yeah.
and 3, damn it.
Yeah,
Like,
Allie Jennings, like he's a guy
yep.
going really late last year, and then now he's changed situations we don't know. Those guys aren't necessarily secure assets year after year, but there's just all sorts of guys, Marcus Cooper, and you can go down the list of these small school backs who are not NFL caliber, but they do make an impact on your team. So don't neglect them at the end of your supplemental drafts, even though we didn't extensively cover them today, and that's not
Even
usually the
guys like
focus that we have.
E even guys like Deuce Vaughn, like, he was really considered just a C2C guy, like a campus guy, and now he's getting some NFL buzz. So, like, some of these guys that you think are just like, "Oh, well, I'll just throw them on the end of my roster," they slide into, like, actual NFL, possible production and that kind of thing. Whereas Deuce Vaughn's probably not gonna be, like, this early pick for you or anything like that. A 3rd, 4th round pick in rookie drafts is still somewhat valuable. At least you're moving him on to your NFL team rather than him just dying on your campus roster.
Yeah, or most importantly, I guess from my perspective, now you have an opportunity to sell Deuce Vaughn before we know that the NFL doesn't actually value like a 5'5", 180-pound player. But yes, like you said, he sometimes these CFF guys can give you a little bonus on top of that, or at least a sell window. Like for example, I still have time if I want to sell Tajay Spears if I don't think that he's actually going to be a good player. So these CFF guys can surprise you.
Absolutely. Well, I think we did a pretty good job of laying out the supplemental draft that you went through. It was obviously an early one. We'll definitely be doing some more supplemental talk as we get into more of, I guess, like normal supplemental season, like that kind of thing. But we wanted to get you some of this early conversation because A, there's not that much going on right now in Devy and C2C, and B, I think that it's important to like learn about these players, especially a lot of the rookies or freshmen, I should say, and even some of the players that maybe you just never heard of, like shoot, what was that last player that we talked about? I now can't think of his name, but regardless, the players that you haven't heard about, all that often or possibly ever, at least if you hear their name once, then you can maybe start hearing their name twice, and then I'll pick up on it. Okay, yeah, I like that player now because John talked about it, or Aaron talked about it, and that kind of thing. So we appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss something. But but until then, we're gonna go ahead and cash out. See you, Aaron.